Hi, Gustav. Very nice to that you could come here and join us. I'm Michael Holdman, and I'm CEO and founder of Prasaga, and we're here to try to find out what it is within the automotive industry, and for that matter, the entire supply chain and regulated industries that are kind of missing, that are necessary for to move the industries and just the global economy further. So, really interested, really happy that you can join. If you'd introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Gustavo Ceballos. I am the president of Geos Global. We're a full-fledged international freight forwarder.
We were having a conversation. I really wanted to get this on camera because it was one of the areas that, again, we're just a foundational blockchain, right? We're an enabling technology that we don't have the expertise in all subject matters. We know how to make things move from one point to another point digitally, securely, and everything. But you brought up a really interesting topic about tariff, which was not something that I had thought of before. But if you could kind of elaborate on that a little more,
Yes.
and then we can discuss how, in our platform with our approach, we'd be able to work with that.
Yes, so the tariff, everybody in our industry, we call it HTS for short, which means Harmonized Tariff System, which started with the GATT, which was the Great Amendment of Trade and Tariff right after World War II, 1947. And then it was renewed in the 90s with the World Trade Organization. They brought in more African countries into the Harmonized Tariff System, which is basically all the countries got together and they say, why don't we classify everything that can be classified the same way. That way we can send everything in and out in a harmonized way, right? So basically the harmonized tariff code is like it goes from the simplest to the most complex, like from live birds, live animal, beverages, all the way to nuclear plants, nuclear components, vehicles, like to the simplest to the most complex. So when you were doing your presentation yesterday, I was thinking it'd be great because you're already assigning a code to the supplier. The supplier would have a code for their products, and those products 95% of the time are going to be sent internationally. Well, why don't we just add the HTS code to every product, and it would save a lot of time because a lot of the countries require the HTS code to be on the invoice for customs purposes, and it would alleviate a lot of headaches. So that you mean money. If the piece is urgent, it would save a lot of time in customs, and it would move seamlessly, import and export.
Yeah, and that's fantastic, and that's exactly what we were hoping, that the ideas would start to flow once we showed that presentation, because the group here really understands, especially when it comes to tariffs and regulated industry and such. And it's very interesting because it could be applied, as we were talked about, the certs, right? A cert on what the metallurgical composition of the bolt is, and can it go into the right position in the car frame that they want to put it in, or not, because it doesn't meet those specs. But that's very interesting because I didn't think of the tariffs, and to be able to create those containment trees that do have those standards. Now, is it a standard form that is being filled out, or is it just a standard of what information should be, but not all countries necessarily? Like, is there more information or less information depending on the country that it's coming
Well,
from?
it's all the countries that are part of the World Trade Organization require a tariff classification for every product that's going to be imported or exported.
Right.
So basically, it's what the product is, the components. We're talking about the origin of the products. Like you can have a casing for the fuses in plastic, but you say, oh, it's manufactured in China with German plastic, right? Because the Germans are really good at making the pellets for the plastic. Is very, very fine product. So what is the certificate of origin? Well, what is the origin of the product? Well, it's German parts manufactured in China, and that has to say on the invoice, because it's really not it's just a process that went through in China. So it's very important for all the countries because there's trade agreements, right?
Right.
Like the NAFTA right now it's called the U.S. Canada Mexico agreement, but they need to have formulas of value content of each originating countries. Like NAFTA, they have to be 65 in some products or 55 of originating products. So if it has more originating from non-NAFTA countries, it will not qualify for duty-free. So that's very important for countries and from factories because they want their product to be NAFTA so they can avoid duties, right?
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, and that really plays into what our system is, and the ability with that ID that's specific, that is, it's a 256-bit hash of random alphanumeric characters that won't be repeated for billions of years. Every single item that is part of the blockchain system in our Saga OS is going to have that individual unique ID, and it never goes away. So you couldn't try to fool somebody like when it comes to NAFTA and such like that. If the component was made in Germany, it's automatically going to show up because that's where it's shipped from. That's where its originating was from, and that account of the manufacturer that did it is just going to be tracked all the way through. And I think that's absolutely fantastic. And what we're really interested in doing now, and another reason for being here, is to start to collaborate with industry and such. To go into those types of, to get that industry involved. Like, how would we go about that? What is there on the alliance?
Okay, for the customs side of how to get the classification of all the products, that's an enormous database because it includes all the products, all living things, everything that you can see everywhere in the world is classified in the harmonized tariff system.
Right,
everything.
right.
There's nothing that cannot be classified.
Right.
Everything's there. So there's a World Customs Organization or a World Trade Organization, but every individual country have their own legislation, and the U.S. they call them rulings. So let's say I want to bring in some tennis shoes from China, and I want to make sure that I classify them in the correct segment or classification. And if I want to make sure, I go in the database for customs and look for rulings. Rulings means that somebody took a shoe and a spec sheet and sent it to a commodity specialist at customs. The commodity specialist looked at it, analyzed it, broke it down, cut it in half, so all the components, and say, this with no doubt is 6499 classification. So you are sure that you're not gonna be wrong in your classification, get any fines, or you're gonna owe duties after a year to customs. So that's one way of doing, but you're gonna need a specialist to be classifying all the products.
Right.
There's databases in the automotive industry. I remember I used to work, Ford was my customer.
Okay.
And we had an office in Detroit that had 24/7, and we had like 4 people classifying 24/7 because of the time differences and everything. They had to be classifying all their part numbers.
Right.
And that database is confidential to them. It costs them money, and they're not going to give it out. So you could find some databases with customs, and there's also organization of freight forwarders and customs broker associations of the U.S. and other countries. But there's a global customs organization also.
Okay, fantastic. Because that's something that we would like. It's kind of the idea of bringing in the alliances and such like that. It's not, and we're not here to try to build those. We're just here to say to the organization here that you can now make your database and put it onto the blockchain, because one of the things that we're finding out here, and maybe you can verify this, is paper trails get lost sometimes, and there's a lot of paper involved in here. It's not necessarily all digital and such.
Exactly. Well, to customs in every country, loss of paper trails means fines.
Yeah.
So you need to have right now they're accepting electronic form. They prefer electronic form. So you need to have a trace where your product came from, and you need to keep it at least 5 years,
Right.
depending on the trade agreement, right?
Right.
But it's a very good way of keeping everything in an electronic form, right? So
Yeah, and the nice thing about the blockchain is it's immutable, right? I mean, that's the biggest value that I think it brings, especially when we're getting into these regulated industries. The ability to have that immutable record, because you can't go and change it on the thousands or tens of thousands of computers, right? It's very easy to do it in one database for somebody to get access and get in, but and which happens many times in testing and research industries and such that we found. Yeah, very interesting on this, and really looking forward to working kind of with industry and going forward with the alliances and such, and hopefully you guys can be a big part of
we'll be happy
this
to.
movement. Yeah.
Yes, we'll be happy to help. Yeah, because, there's compliance everywhere. Every part has compliance, like we were talking about, all the list of the parties that are, the denied parties list for export. If you include that database, it would help everybody that's exporting and say, okay, I'm gonna export this to this party. And if you have your database updated with the nice parties, let's say, it would flag you, say, yo, you cannot send to this party because it was put on the Department of State yesterday.
Right,
For
right.
X reason.
Yeah.
So that could be checked under the export licenses, or could also be added to that for product, for classification. I think I didn't mention that classification for export, it's exactly the same, but with less number in the US. In other countries, they handle the same process. They use the tariff system for exports.
Okay, very nice. Yeah, no, it's definitely another area for us to explore as far as alliance and everything goes. In terms of your organization, and mainly doing logistics, right? I mean, that's the focus that you have on there. We see this industry going and building, and I'd like to find out what your thoughts are on here, because it's, right now they're saying it's an $8.8 trillion industry in logistics, and it's moving to 15.5 trillion, there's estimated by 2023. Does this have a lot to do with COVID and such? And what are you seeing as far as a logistics carrier or company in terms of the growth that's happening within?
Well, the growth right now, it's a chain reaction, right? The reason there's so much saturation in ocean and air cargo and everything is because there was a time where the factories that manufacture widgets for somebody else was closed, and they went to another producer, and they had so much demand that they finished their production, and then when these others guys opened, there was already more demand for what they could produce. So everything started coming in from Asia into, when Asia opened, everything started coming to the US, and there was more, they didn't have empty containers on the ocean side, which is the cheapest way of transporting cargo. And then there's no more empty containers, so they're charging a plus to get the containers back. To give you an example, an ocean container from Shanghai to Los Angeles used to be $3,500 before the pandemic. Now it's $12,000.
Wow.
$12,000, right? So on the air side, air used to be eight times more expensive than ocean. Now it's just half.
Really?
Half as expensive. So it's incredible. So that's what's happening with the pandemic. But it's estimated that in a couple of years, by the end of 2022, it's going to come down to normal with a lot of regulation. And it was a good experience for our industry, because the governments in different countries found out where they need to regulate.
Right.
And it's gonna keep growing, right? Because it's the demand that's gonna keep on growing, and the opportunities for nearshoring. Talking about factories coming into Mexico instead of China and India for the U.S. market, it's going to boom incredibly, because Mexico has a young population. They have a lot of college students, and it's within hours of the U.S. So you can send it by land or air, and it could be in couple hours, 3 hours, could be back in the factory. So that's going to be a big advantage.
Yeah, fantastic. And I think the biggest thing that I see as far as the foundation and Prasaga is because of the rise in transactions, that means that there's more opportunity for fraud. I mean, if the transactions are going to double within the next few years, then that's really a need for an immutable service that is going to allow, and with all the regulations, of course, if it can all be automated and you're just automatically regulatory compliant, that's really the focus that we've been on here, and it's really good to hear from people in industry that understand that are identifying and validating that need for that. So wonderful. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me.